Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the Devon Transport webinar on Friday afternoon. Just to set the scene a little bit, my name is Paul Pizzala from FX, and just to say a few words about FX, we work with organizations across community energy, affordable and social housing. And one of the areas that is growing in interest on our platform is the electrification of transport, which is one of the areas that we're here to focus on today. Just to set the scene a little bit in terms of our panel, the panel represents some of the key players from Devon County Council and East Devon District Council, who are developing and implementing the net zero plan in order to reach net zero by 2050, and that is in recognition of the climate emergency. We also have Jose from Winea and Mark from CoCar, who are part of the consortium leading and delivering on the rapid charging project. So a little bit of housekeeping from me to let you know that the event is being recorded and is shareable on social media. Please do note that this is not financial advice, and anyone needing it should speak to an IFA. And finally, to the audience, please do put your questions in the chat box, and we will take these as the conversation goes along. So, to introduce our panelists today, we have Alistair Mumford, who's the Corporate Energy Manager for Devon County Council and has been involved in the renewable energy sector for many years. He also has a very keen interest in social enterprises and cooperatives, having been a founder, a director and co-founder of Topsham Ales, and also a director for CoCar's Exeter's Cooperative Car Club. We have Catherine Causley, East Devon District Council, who's part of the Climate Change Office and implements the Climate Change Action Plan and strategy with her teams across energy, water, education, behaviour change, community resilience, and transport. And that also includes looking at adaptation and mitigation. Mark Hodgson, who's Managing Director of CoCar. Mark leads in business development with key stakeholders, including local authorities, housing developers, and businesses. And founded CoCar in 2005 and more recently CoBikes in 2016. And finally, we have Jose Contreras. Jose is Director of Winea Southwest and is leading on the development of electric vehicle charging in Exeter, Devon, and more widely across the UK. Winea is part of the Digia group that has a long and successful track record in EV charging, renewable energy, and energy efficiency. So thank you very much to the panelists for taking part today. I'm sure it's going to be a really rich and interesting conversation. So I wanted to kick off with a questions for Christine and Alistair, please. And can you talk a little bit about how the Devon's net zero carbon vision has been developed, what the roles of the key stakeholders are, and how the public have reacted, and just maybe also talk a little bit about how important it is to have a plan. Catherine or Alistair?
Catherine,
yeah, thanks, Alistair. So in 2019, we declared a climate emergency, and we created a climate change action plan and strategy, which can be found on our website. And we've looked at a variety of things, and we've tried to do this as widely as possible. We've looked, we're having a focus to start off with on our internal emissions. So we know that we are directly responsible for about 22,000 tonnes of carbon a year. So we're looking at things that we can do, and then allowing the planned investment. For example, we are converting our vehicles to electric vehicles, and we're about 33% at the moment. Engagement with the public's been hard because we were at the point where we were really about to start to launch this, and then COVID has hit, and it has kind of slowed us up a bit, but there's been a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes. And the work that Devon Climate Emergency, that the committee have done on their Devon Carbon Plan, is going to be absolutely revolutionary, and the approach they've taken is fantastic. So, and we were looking to update our action plan and our strategy as time goes on. It's a live document, and we will be working with our partners, including Devon County Council, to ensure that it's fit for purpose. Alistair.
Yeah, so as Catherine mentioned, we've got the initiative called the Devon Climate Emergency, which is a cross-party, Devon-wide sort of partnership of public sector organisations looking to try and respond to the climate emergency. They set up a citizens' assembly, which I think was about 70 people on that, sort of random, but also trying to make sure we got a good representation of the people of Devon. So they came together to chew over all of the stuff that makes up the response to the climate emergency, really. And from that is going to become the Devon Carbon Plan. Now, we've got the interim plan at the moment, and the final draft is imminent. It's been imminent for a while, but as you can imagine, it's a big document. There's lots of consultation in there, but it's, you know, I went along to some of the Citizens Assembly sessions, and it was fantastic. You know, we were getting engagement, obviously, from people that are not really engaged with this before, and it was kind of refreshing in some ways to see some of their frustrations. Some of these things are taking so long to happen, but anyway, we're moving forward, and I think it's a really great basis for some of the actions in there. It's all on the website. There's loads in there, so I don't really want to sort of go through that now, Paul, but do just Google Devon Climate Emergency and you'll see the interim plan there, and the final plan will be coming forward. I think one of the key aspects just to bring out of that is, of course, in relation to transport, it's very important in terms of being a big area of carbon emissions, and electric vehicles are a part of that. But the key thing is to reduce the use of transport, sort of individual transport, moving over to public transport, and obviously cycling, walking, and all of that kind of thing. But yes, in there is the move towards an electric vehicle infrastructure for Devon.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Alistair. And I really do appreciate that. It's important to use as much low carbon public infrastructure as possible. So, you know, there is a wider integrated strategy across energy, transport, and I suppose in Devon, farming is quite a big thing as well. Actually, that's quite a big part of the role in reducing emissions. So looking forward to seeing some electric vehicle tractors at some point, but you know, maybe that's not quite slated as yet. But focusing on the role of low carbon transport, is there a vision of what the transport system in Devon is going to look like? Are there key milestones, and how is it progressing to date? And that's a question I'd like to put to Mark and Christine initially, and Jose, if you've got thoughts on other markets that have developed, maybe you could pitch those into.
Alistair, you're going to take that from a Devon County perspective, and then I sort of maybe fill in from our perspective.
Yeah, okay. Well, just to quickly say then, I suppose from our point of view, obviously we're waiting to see what the Devon Carbon Plan, and that's going to steer lots of the activity there, and there's just a sort of research being done for that. We've also got our electric vehicle charging infrastructure strategy, which will be coming out for public consultation soon. So I can't really talk about what because I don't know really what's going to be in there, but I would hope that in there we've got an understanding, if I look specifically at charging, around what type of charging facilities and where each type of charging facility needs to be. So that's the sort of key thing that we'll want from that. And of course, within getting to that deployed, we'll take partnership with the private sector, with community groups, as well as with the public sector as well. I'll pass over to Mark to hear his thoughts.
Okay, so yeah, hello. So I was a member on the evidence base sort of for the Devon Climate Emergency sort of plan, if you like, from a transport perspective. So CoCars and CoBikes, so we offer shared mobility, shared electric cars and shared electric bikes that people can just rent by their app, but just for the time they use them, and so they're available on street. So we have cars in Exeter and some other places in Devon, and we also have a lot of bikes in Exeter. I guess if you look from our perspective, we're increasingly seeing sort of the rollout aligned with RCD of shared electric cars across Devon, and we're working with a number of locations, south, north, east of Devon, both community groups and local authorities. And that's both cars and bikes. And when we're also, and we're looking at also at sort of the mobility hub concept, where a lot of people talk about that, where you can actually have a modal hub where you can have bus, bike, normal bike hire, normal bike racks, electric bikes, electric cars, electric charging. So that gives you the capability to have a load of different modal shifts across there. And then, and just from a carbon perspective from CoCars, one of our cars takes in Devon takes about in Exeter takes about 8 cars off the road. So that's a lifetime carbon emission reduction of 200 tons when you take into all the embodied energy of the cars you take off the road. So if you think, and we've taken over 200 cars off the road in Exeter, so that's a significant amount of tonnage that you can do, because it's about making the car and then it's lifetime emissions as well. So those are sort of significant figures. And so if one of the things, I guess, and it's very much using the existing infrastructure, but more efficiently. So if, as I said, one of our cars takes 8 cars off the road, so that could take a majority, and given the vast majority of trips in this country are under 5 miles, then there's also a real opportunity to convert to active travel, whether that's through shared electric bikes, as it is here in Devon, or whether it's normal bikes or walking, etc. And certainly I know in the strategy very much from the Devon Climate Emergency is very much active travel first, shared mobility, and then electrify the fleet across that network. So that's very much where we stand put, if you like. So
yeah, that's the integrated strategy.
That's from our perspective, from obviously from CoCars, and that's what we're working on in Exeter and what we're trying to do in Devon.
And Jose, how's what are the synergies in terms of working with CoCars and?
Yeah. So it's important when we put the consortium together back in 2019 and we started working in this project, we felt it was very important to involve other stakeholders so that this was not just the delivery of charging infrastructure, but that it was wider than that, and pretty much aligns with what Alistair, Catherine and Mark have been discussing. By bringing CoCars into the picture, you are delivering much more than just infrastructure into charging infrastructure into Devon, which obviously is crucial, because without the charging infrastructure, the transition to electric vehicles is not going to happen. But clearly there's also much more than just the infrastructure. If you look at our Spanish network, for example, these are mostly rapid chargers in motorways across Spain, where we run the largest rapid charging network at the moment. And there again, we try to engage with other stakeholders and not just putting the chargers on the ground. I think there's a wider debate there. The transition is going to affect many areas, and we want to be part of that solution.
Yeah, I see. And then what are the sort of specific opportunities and challenges in a city like Exeter? And we talk about public infrastructure. What Why is it important to have on-street EV charging?
That's a great question, Paul. We run the risk that this transition to electric vehicles becomes hugely unfair if we don't put public infrastructure, charging infrastructure on our streets. Because at the moment, without that infrastructure, it's only really those that have their own driveways and that can charge at home that can make that transition to electric vehicles. So we think it's key that public charging infrastructure goes on our streets, because otherwise it will just make this whole transition very unfair.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jose. And then Mark, you said 200 switching to a CoCar potentially takes 200 tons of carbon.
Yeah, so we've got the 200 tons. So we've got rid of over 200 cars in Exeter through the surveys. It's more than that now. Where what we look at doing is how many cars we do surveys and say how many people have either not bought a car, got rid of a car, or deferred buying a car. We do those every year, and it's part of our metric. So that's a key thing. And so absolutely, as Jose say, 35% of people don't have driveways. So, there's a real opportunity from having close rapid chargers to them. That's a huge market in the UK. So obviously that's where Jose is on the rapid charging. But obviously then there's also an opportunity from our perspective, if people don't own their car, to have access to a car, electric car, through sharing when they only pay for what they use. And obviously it's a fraction of the cost. And so I guess then, so if you say that, so we're taking 200 cars and then going back onto the 200 tons, that's based on the average car in its lifetime is about 28 tons CO2 on its lifetime when it's made and actually through life from an ICE car, so that's a petrol car. And so obviously our cars are all electric. And then even though we use those ID3s, which are theoretically net zero at manufacturer, I'll just ignore that and say you minus one off the other. And then, that means you're saving 7 or 8 cars off the road, and that's a significant amount of tonnage through its lifetime. Because I think we tend to think about carbon at source, so a carbon like electricity generating, but obviously it's all the materials and embodied carbon used to make the car that is still part of your carbon tonnage. So so it's significant, but I think that's why it works really well by having public charging on street, really close where people live. So it's behaviour change and the ability to own a car is really good. But then having us, which obviously still use the chargers, which is great. So that's very mutually agreement. So it also gives a base load, but also give people who can't afford a car or don't want to own a car or only need to use a car bit, that fits very, very well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. That's really clear. I mean, I'm really interested to pick up on the idea of behaviour change, because typically in any new and emerging market, you have what they call the early adopters, and then you have the next stage of adoption before the market hits the tipping point. And Catherine, I know that you're involved in behaviour change. And
absolutely, this is a really key thing, and as Mark and Jose have mentioned, we have to be really careful about social equality. We've got a large in East Devon. It's a mainly rural area, so we've got putting in an electric charging network in somewhere like Exeter is very different from doing it in East Devon. We also have a very large seasonal tourist population, which we need to cater for. And this is where the development of our EV charging network is really important. Being a mainly rural area, we have some areas where public transport is very poor. We don't have that much for train line, and we need to ensure that we are providing options for people, and absolutely CoCars is part of it, electric vehicle charging is part of it on street. And also we need to look in our towns, how are we going to provide charging for the places, 38% of all our domestic housing stock was built before the Second World War. not at a time when you would expect to have a driveway or there's options to. So we need to cater for those, for our residents and our tourists. We need to think about more built up areas, and also we need to think about our rural areas where maybe it's not as desirable to be seen to be putting electric charging, but it's really essential. We also need to work with our public. As you said, this behaviour change, it is different to run an electric vehicle than an ICE vehicle, and it's getting that acceptance of doing things slightly differently when it comes to charging and things. And as Mark said, we have a huge percentage of our journeys are less than 5 miles. How can we do that low distance travel in a bit of a different way? And I think a big part of that also is selling the other benefits, whether it's from the health benefits from active travel or the air quality improvements and that kind of thing. And this is where EV charging absolutely has a place to play.
Brilliant, Catherine. Thanks so much for that. I was actually going to ask, Alistair about pollution and noise, particularly in relation to schools and young people, and whether that's an important aspect of the low carbon transition.
Pollution, definitely. I think noise is a bit of a difficult one. I'm not an expert in this, but I think I'd heard that the rolling noise is actually the larger component of the overall noise of vehicles. Although there are some very noisy vehicles out there, and that's mainly down to their engines and exhausts. But yeah, it should see some benefit. But yeah, the air pollution is massive, and we're really hoping that the electric transition, public transport is pretty good. Most of the buses out there, maybe some of the school fleet is not. But yeah, if we can start to see streets around our schools, well, even just where we live, improving in terms of air quality, then that's going to be fantastic. And obviously there's the knock-on economic benefits, because there's less strain on the NHS and we have more productive people. But yeah, it'd be nice to have that happen, really.
Yeah, so there are what you would call positive externalities.
Yeah,
it's not just about reducing carbon, it's about improving people's quality of life.
Indeed.
I'm just really interested to ask Jose how he thinks, and when they think about rural EV charging, is that a part of the business plan?
Commercially, it is currently not quite there yet. So it would have to be integrated into a wider program where some parts are rural and most parts are urban. And that's actually one of the advantages of the rapid charging project as well, in the sense that we've incorporated some areas which would on their own not be commercially viable, but as part of a wider program can be delivered, right? So we've taken that into account as well.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, the conurbation cities like Exeter, where there's a higher, denser populations, more EV chargers, you can put more EV chargers in. It helps to subsidize
any commercial agent operating in the EV infrastructure space will target Exeter first and target other cities second in the area. Our project will put chargers in Lympston, will put chargers in Behaviour, will put chargers in Sidmouth. So these are locations where your standard commercial agents will probably not approach at this point in time initially.
Yeah.
But we are doing it precisely because we're delivering a wider program, and therefore within that wider program, we're happy to sacrifice a bit of commercial profit for the sake of delivering a wider charging infrastructure.
Yeah, fantastic. And when you were developing the consortium, was that part of the conversation that you had initially with the partners?
Well, we're clearly, involving Devon County Council, CoCars, and other stakeholders clearly brings their voice to the table as well, right? Mm-hmm. And we are, as you mentioned at the beginning, we're a company that prides itself on delivering net zero across all our business lines. That includes renewable energy, energy efficiency, EV charging. So yeah, we take these opinions very seriously, and we try to incorporate it into our business model.
Great, thanks, Jose.
Mm-hmm.
And Alistair, on the citizens, I sort of want to go back a little bit to behaviour change, because I'm quite interested to understand what's going to drive the uptake, because electric vehicle sales, 25% of vehicle sales now in the UK, if I'm correct. So that number's really starting to achieve a critical mass, I think. And then I'm sort of interested to know what the feedback from the Citizens Assembly has been in terms of how important do they feel electric vehicles are as part of the solution?
Yeah, I would probably say that they think they're very important, because, not to be negative, but a lot of people love cars. We love the independence of them. So, you know, there's that harder bit about getting people to give up their cars and move to transport, public transport, and walking and cycling. So the electric vehicle fits very well into our consumer society that it is at the moment, and it's quite an amazing experience driving electric vehicles. As I've driven my CoCar one, to give Mark a plug, down today. So yeah, I can't see the growth doing anything but increasing as we see more and more vehicles coming onto the market. You know, we've got the massive growth that's going to start to, well, it's already happening, but in the fleet as well, in the sales, people who work in sales and all that sort of thing, you know, that transition is going to be massive. And then the van transition, you know, we're seeing with Amazon electrifying their fleet. So it's just going to get bigger and bigger. I think the main limiting factor at the moment is going to be obviously the cost and also the supply chain. As we all know, it takes quite a long time to get hold of electric vehicles.
All right, okay. Have you got any comments on that, Jose and Mark, in terms of getting hold of electric vehicles? Is that a blip in the supply chain that's kind of related to COVID and what's going on in the Ukraine, or is it something that's going to be a longer term challenge?
Mark, I'll let you answer that one, because I think you're feeling the brunt of that.
Yeah. Yeah, getting electric vehicles is really, really difficult. You know, when we've had electric vehicles on our fleet for 5 years now. So when we used to be able to you'd literally be able to go in there, pick up a Renault Zoe at the time, and almost walk it off the forecourt. And they didn't really know how to sell them, and you know, or would try and sell petrol. Now, if you want to go and get, so we use a lot of ID3s, and you know, if you want an ID3 now, you'll be way into next year, if not longer, to get one. So it's huge amount of difference. That's really driven by the COVID, which shut a lot of factories down. Every car is built around a chip. So every car starts with a chip, and that's how they start, and then they build a car out from that. And obviously, there's been a huge chip supply shortage, which is crippling. And then obviously we've had, let's say, COVID, then there's just a demand. And then obviously then there's things like having Shanghai closed, etc. You know, so that's really caused lots of problems. And the trouble is more electricity. So EV charging, e-bikes, renewable energy, all uses lots of chips. So the demand is really, really tight. But I think also as well, it's because there's lots of people who through COVID suddenly thought, actually, you know, I don't need that car. If I'm going to get one, I'm going to get an electric. So there's seen a huge growth in that as well. And that's also, which means the business model for rapid charging Devon is even better, because, you know, more people want to use electric cars, but there's just a long chain and supply chain. However, if you wanted to go and get a Tesla, the supply chains are shorter. The supply times are shorter for Teslas, last months rather than years. It does depend on the type of car. Some cars are 6 or 9 months, but it depends on the really popular ones for a long time. But the Teslas, you can get some in a few months. And that's because he's sort of worked out his battery and supply chain all in one go. So he owns his own battery makers, etc. And he was way ahead of the game, whereas the others are all just catching up. But I think, you know, from our perspective, I know that people join us because you can't get hold of an electric car, so they want to use an electric car, and that's why I have ID3s. And I'm very pleased that I also enjoyed his trip, because, you know, they're really nice cars. And then you sort of go, do I want to buy one, or do I actually just want to use
Yeah. What is an RD3 for the?
So an ID3 is a Volkswagen ID3, and that's sort of the Golf equivalent sized car. Very nice, very modern. But we have a range of different cars, you know, our Fiat 500Es and Renault Zoes, etc., just to give people that. But that's very much a family car, very much with around, you know, 200 plus mile range, 200 goes up to about 220. You know, you can get pretty much most places and carry people with it, and it's good space. So it's a good size car.
Yeah. So you're busting a bit of a myth there in terms of the range. In terms of the range of the cars, that they've got good range, and obviously, you know, both for, I mean, Catherine, you were talking about earlier, I think you said 30% of the fleets in Devon County Council has been electrified. Is that correct?
So the East Devon District Council, and it's our street scene fleet. So that's the guys that are out looking after our flower beds and doing our small works and things like that. And they've moved over to the electric vehicles, and it's actually working out really well. And for the last month, we've had one of Mark's CoCars as a trial for our staff to use. So that we're not using our own vehicles. We're part of our commitment. We are phasing out our central car user allowance, which we're looking at various things on how we can help our staff move over to electric vehicles, including maybe something like a salary sacrifice scheme. So, and we've actually had a CoCar to use, and I must say I've been driving, and it's fantastic. Really fun to drive, you know, really nippy, and you know, it's been really well received by the staff actually, who, you know, want to be doing the right thing. At the moment, electric vehicles are still quite expensive, but you know, as everyone was saying, with the fleet sales and things like that, the second-hand market will soon be developing, and that's going to bring down costs, and car manufacturers are looking to bring down the cost all the time. So I think that it's just a matter of time, but you know, being able to zip around, and all the staff that drive our street scene vehicles or have driven the CoCar all wouldn't go back now, you know, given the chance, would definitely stick with an electric vehicle. So yeah.
Well, what word of mouth is often the best way of selling a
yes,
isn't it?
Yes, and we're getting people from each department to come and have a go, and then they tell everyone how lovely it is at their team meetings, and then suddenly there's a flurry of people all booking from that team to come and have a go on the car and use it for work. So you know, it's been really popular, and we're expanding this trial. We do sort of 500,000 miles a year in business miles for as a council. So we're looking to get a fleet of 3 of these vehicles, which we will use, and we're going to trial different strategies to see what works. But we've got a fantastic year-long trial, and we've committed to this. This is the way we're going in the future.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to ask a question that's one of the audience have put in a second. I'm just going to read it out verbatim. But before that, Catherine, are you using Winnea's EV chargers at the moment?
Yes.
Oh, you are? Okay, good. Good. And I suppose, Jose, I just wanted to ask you what your experience, well, 2 things actually. Technology is obviously critically important, both the software and the hardware. So I'm sort of interested to know about how easy is it to use an EV charger? Do I have to be technically sophisticated, or is it just literally plug and play?
Yeah. Well, it takes a bit of get using to. I mean, when you approach one of these chargers, you will have a set of instructions telling you exactly what to do. Intuitively, doesn't seem too difficult, but then when you actually get to do it, you might need to try a couple of times before you get it right. And obviously each piece of hardware, each type of charger, because we're not just using one charger, we'll be using a variety of chargers, has its own intricacies. So yes, I mean, it will, for a new user, it will be, will take a bit of get using to. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you help them get over that hurdle?
Well, as I said, you've got the instructions on the charger, you've got the website, you've got customer service that we will be running. with telephone number people can call and approach. We take a lot of pride in making sure that our customer service works very well, especially at the beginning with the rollout of a network. In Spain, we are the highest rated customer service of EV charging networks. So we have a very proactive approach in calling customers rather than them calling us. So for example, if a customer is charging and he's not able to charge, we can identify that remotely and call the customer rather than wait for them to call us.
Yeah, brilliant. So, Mark, did you want to say something? I saw you sort of nodding there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we have customers who use chargers. So we have a range of chargers and our own chargers that were done beforehand, because I said we've been going for a few years before this project. And actually, it's a bit like using our cars. When you first time, what do I do? I book it online, and use an app or on a phone, a card to open a car. But once you've done it once or twice, you go, oh yeah, that's fine. And the same with the charges. Either whether you're using an RFID card or an app, or just use your contactless to pay. Actually, once people say, oh yes, I do it in this order, this, and this, and I guess I probably, we've got a lot of customers, and obviously they use our cars, and they're not, they use the charge points, and the cars are connected to the charge point. So they get used to it. Once you've done it once or twice, you sort of go, oh yeah, this is just, why do I drive around and throw very smelly, oily petrol all over my leg when I go and fill my car up? And then I'm driving around in a bomb, that's because you're not supposed to have matches at a petrol station. You suddenly go, this is actually, that was it. It's quite simple. So it's just getting people into that. And then once they think, oh yeah, actually, I just plug it in. It's just like a plug. At home, it's just it's just a big plug. That's all. You've got to get into the car. And once you've done it once or twice, you'll be much more relaxed on it. And what we often do is do sort of on street, love your EV sort of days, where you get people and look, this is how it works, and go for a bit of spin and plug it in. Oh, great, And I think then just getting the community used to it is fine. The people will always put little barriers in their heads and say, oh, it's going to be really complicated, or it'll never work, or it won't be charged, or all these other reasons. But actually, this is that's not how it is.
Paul, just to slight comment on that, I think Mark and Jose are right. I think the main problem we've got at the moment, though, is that the modern chargers are great to use, but we still have out there a lot of old chargers, and they are not great to use. They're also not very reliable either. And so the biggest problem we've got at the moment is not range anxiety, but it's charge anxiety. Is the charger going to be working? And so that's a critical part of any agreements with Devon County Council, and I'm sure for Catherine's work as well, is making sure in those legal arrangements that we can put as much pressure onto any charge point operator to ensure that their charge points are working. I think that's going to be easier for the charge point operators because of those technological improvements that have happened. But yeah, it will take a while for people to convert old, terrible charge points over to hopefully the brave new world of these new reliable ones.
So, Jose, what's your response to that?
To the new tech coming in terms of chargers.
Well, so yeah, so the having this the older technology, which is less reliable.
Yeah, no, that's obviously a problem or an issue with any industry that is growing fast and comes from a low base, like the case of the electric vehicle charging industry. New tech is coming on the market every day. Old tech is being replaced very fast as well. And as Alistair mentions, the new tech that we're seeing now coming off the manufacturers is reliable, it's robust, it's resilient. So it's and we, as I mentioned before, we have a lot of experience already operating with many manufacturers of chargers. So we make, as the market progresses, there'll be clear winners and losers in terms of charger manufacturers. But we will be very well positioned to identify those, given our presence in the market.
Yeah, so you can pick and choose the best technology, basically.
Yeah, we're not wedded to any particular manufacturer, and we are using in our different networks different types of charges.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that. So I'm going to read a question out from the audience. They say the idea of putting EV chargers on streets is something that is belatedly being flagged as a gift to the wealthier, paid by taxpayers, and leaving the less well-off behind. It goes on to say, the idea of e-hubs prioritizing vehicle mix and share, and then incorporating a charging point for public use is much fairer. So what is being looked at in Devon to include this social equity issue?
Well, if I can jump onto that one, that's precisely what we're trying to address here in Rapid Charging Devon, with the consortium that we built, and specifically with CoCars. So our chargers will have, in many instances, a CoCar available on site, which will be charging off our chargers. And as I've mentioned before, the transition to electric vehicles can be very unfair if, one, public charging is not provided, and two, shared EVs are not provided. And we're doing both. So I think we are, in my opinion, I think we are addressing that social equity issue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jose. Sorry, Alison, did you want to say something?
Well, it was just from the point of view that the Devon County Council, obviously the landowner for the initial rapid charging Devon phases, so in Exeter. And yes, when we were choosing sites, affluence did come into the factor, but often it was more a case of, you know, there are terrace streets that are just not going to be able to charge, so we need to put them in those areas. But it is a difficult one for us, because, you know, we're all thinking, all right, well, we could put them in the less affluent areas, but they might not get any demand. But when we talked about fleet as well and things like that, so we can't really leave those areas behind. So yeah, so we are trying as much as possible to make sure that there's a spread across the whole of Devon.
Daphne, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just say it's kind of early days really at the moment still. I mean, things are progressing, and they're progressing rapidly, as they need to and should be. But we are absolutely taking this on, and this is an issue that we're all aware of. And the idea of mobility hubs and things like that are getting far greater. And we are looking at from a tourist point of view, but also from our residents, and making sure that social justice is at the heart of our decision making. So yeah, we are getting there. Things don't always move as quickly as we'd like, but it's something that's definitely on the radar.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that. So another question to the panelists. This is for Catherine and Alistair. Surely there will not be widespread movement from car dependency without a better model for public transport, especially buses. Catherine and Alistair, please comment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, can't disagree with that one.
I mean, when I came onto this meeting, I said, I'm going to tell everyone that I only think electric vehicles are a transitionary tool. So, and I absolutely do. And I think that we need, the bigger picture. We need to, look at how we're designing our towns and all the rest of it. But, they are words for the meantime. Alistair can give a much better update on our public transport. That falls under their remit. So, but yeah, no, absolutely, it's a thing. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, and we must look at all the options. And I don't necessarily think electric vehicles are the final answer. But we'll see.
Yeah, totally agree. I keep on thinking my eldest daughter's 9 and the youngest is 6. Are they going to learn to drive a car? I don't know. I really just don't know. So we've got autonomous vehicles coming down the line as well. But in terms of the bus fleet, so we know Stagecoach is keen to, so the Stagecoach is the operator in Devon, so they're keen to transition over to electric vehicles. It seems that they would like a little bit of government support to make that transition. And unfortunately, we've been unsuccessful in any bids to date to get that support. I couldn't possibly say why. I think they were good bids, but I think other areas just look a bit more attractive to those funding schemes. But whenever they come up, we will keep trying. And it may be that sooner or later, you won't need any funding for it.
Thank you for that. And then I'm looking to Mark and Jose for a riposte to Catherine and Alistair. What does the future look like in terms of the transport mix is the question, I suppose.
So I think cities should go. So we're working with Exeter. Exeter is intending to put 12,000 more homes into Exeter, just to give an example, and that's on brownfield land. And to achieve that, it's looking at reducing some road space and making movement much more through micromobility. You certainly see the successful cities around the world where you move into mass transit and micromobility in cities, and you begin to remove the situation of private car, or certainly that's shared, or much less. I think you're going to see that. Obviously, then as you come into a place like Devon, where you've got a much more rural area, then I think you're going to find there's going to be a blend. So you're going to see I think the future will be much better cycle infrastructure and micromobility infrastructure, so people can either rent one or own it themselves. I think also then you will see the transition to whether it's electric buses or hydrogen, which is potential in the future. And I think you're probably going to see much more the Velo model, which is much more the on-demand shuttles. And then I think there will be, as we've reopened, like in Devon, we've reopened the railway up to Oakhampton, which has been extremely popular. And you've seen that those rail connections. But it is going to be a blended mix. But I think you are going to see, there's no doubt, if we're going to achieve a net zero targets in transport, we've got to see quite a dramatic reduction in both in terms of our pollution through travel, our CO2 travel, and actually then inevitably some level of shared aspects is going to be becoming much more of a mass adoption over the next period of time.
And Jose, how do you think about that blended mix and what the future looks like?
Well, I think I think people are starting to realize that transition to electric vehicles is no longer optional. So we've got the 2030 deadline of sales of banning of sales of new diesel and petrol cars. That's less than 8 years away, and clearly we don't have the infrastructure to support that transition. In terms of public charging infrastructure is not there, and I think now people are starting to realize, and the latest figures of the sales of EVs show it, that this transition is definitely happening and that it's no longer optional. Right? We will need to make at an individual level that decision sooner or later. That's where we see it. We no longer think it's optional, but clearly it needs to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. I think that's quite what I appreciate about having this panel is there's a good diversity of views, and it feels very well represented in terms of the future that we're all aiming to get to. Electric vehicles are definitely a growing part of the mix, and there's going to be interesting conversations to be had about how much public infrastructure there is and how much private infrastructure there is, and what that means for different modes of transport. But absolutely 100% electric vehicles are at the center of that right now. I think we're coming up to the end of the session, and wanted to say that Winea has a live offer, a 6% interest and 10-year bonds on FX's platform, and we've already reached first target. If I may just ask Jose to finish up on that, what is the funding going to enable Winea to do, and what are the prospects for the future, both in Exeter and wider?
Yeah, certainly. So the project started in 2019, as we've explained before. Wenea is part of the wider DHIA group. We've always supported this project from the beginning from our own equity. We've supported it for many reasons, but fundamentally because it's a strategic project for the group and it's delivering, it's the platform through which we want to deliver further public charging infrastructure to the UK. So it's a very important project for the group. And we've now reached the minimum that we wanted to reach on that platform at 400,000. We've exceeded that minimum. We're not there in terms of the maximum amount that we wanted to reach. And if we don't reach it, it's fine. We'll, as I say, we'll continue to support the project with our own equity and make sure that we deliver that vision that we want to deliver to Devon.
Yeah, and just to say that the offer has been extended to the end of June now. So it remains, I mean, I just wonder if anybody has any final comments they want to share with the audience before we sign off. I mean, it's been a really fascinating and informative panel session for me. I've learned a lot.
I think, Paula, just one thing, I'd encourage everybody to, you know, in the communities that they're in, to engage with this debate. You know, we do need to start thinking about what charging infrastructure means for small villages, hamlets, towns, cities, and things like that. There's going to be some big decisions that are going to have to be made around the types of technologies, the locations of the technologies, the impacts that's going to have on parking capacity and things like that. So, yeah, so I'm hoping that, you know, this will be a bottom-up type stuff. You know, Devon County Council is going to be keen to get charge points into as many areas as possible. We want to work with communities to do that. So if people can start those debates, that would be really good. And you've got my contact details if they want to get in touch with me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alistair. Catherine, any final comments?
Just to echo what Alistair said, really, is this is something we want to do with our communities. You know, we don't want to do it for them or to them. It's really important that we have the buy-in and that we do this in a way that's going to be useful, acceptable, and you know, well placed. So absolutely, you know, we would like our communities to get involved, and I will pop my environment email address in the chat. So if anyone does want to let me know their views, I would like to hear them.
Yeah, brilliant. And just to say that we'll be sharing this the video of this conference to all the participants. And I don't know, Mark, if you want to have a final couple of words, or happy to.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think as everybody said, you know, I think please everybody think about in the future, and I think that electric is a transition, but it absolutely is now. And I think, you know, think about what you're going to do in terms of charging. Think about whether you really, my comment would be, think about whether you really need that car. Do you need two cars? Most householders own two cars. So why don't you go down to one, share one, keep one, and if you're going to have one, have electric. That can make a significant amount of money. And if you're going to share, if you're going to cut down, then you can buy yourself an e-bike or use one of our shared electric bikes. I think people, if you get used to thinking about that as what's the best mode of transport, rather than hold the cars directly out the front of my house, and I've got two, but I can't afford an electric car. Well, maybe if you get rid of one, I have electric car and then have the shared one for the you know, the trips. We certainly know that most of our usage is the second car. Sometimes it's the first car, but mainly it's people's second car. That gives people that capability to do that.
Brilliant. And Jose, any final words from you?
Well, we are, you know, we're looking at a very ambitious target from, you know, to reach that 2030 deadline. We need to deliver a lot of rapid charging infrastructure. We've been discussing other modes of transport, shared transportation, etc. But let's not forget also the urgency of delivering basic charging infrastructure onto our streets, which is what we're trying to do, so that at least, you know, the minimum transition can happen of those people that want to buy an EV but can't because they just don't have anywhere to charge it. So yes, I mean, I think we've discussed very interesting angles in this debate, and we are very excited, very keen to deliver that vision.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it remains for me to say thank you very much to our audience for listening, and thank you very much to our panelists for their insight and their wise words, and really great to see so many people coming together to deliver the low transition future. And remains for me to say good afternoon and see you next time. Thank you.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.